This lesson is the async and await keywords in JavaScript. The objectives for this lesson are to implement the async and await keywords when using promises. You're going to understand how to manage errors while using async await and observe the flow of your code when utilizing the async and await keywords. The async and await keywords work hand in hand with promises. You create a promise in a function. You then create a function prefixed with the async keyword, and you call that promise function with the await keyword in front of it. So the code waits on the promise function until that promise is completed. This makes your code read very similar to synchronous code. Let's take a look at our first sample, and that is processing a successful async and await sample. In this HTML file down here in the script, notice on lines 48 through 59, I've got that same fetch function that we've been using where we pass in some value and then we create a new promise. It has a resolve callback. We then call the resolve and pass back the value. Up on lines 40 through 46, this is now our asynchronous function. So you prefix the function keyword with the async keyword. Then on line 42, when you call the fetch or any function that has a promise in it, you must use the await keyword in front of that function call. That means that execution for all intents and purposes is stopping right here until such time as that promise then either succeeds or fails. In this case, it's going to succeed. So then on line 45, we're going to put out that response. And that is going to work because we're awaiting on that promise to finish. So let's go ahead and try this out. We'll bring up our console window, and you can see that we went from in the fetch true function, and then we got the response that was returned from that. Now, if you want, you can use the traditional .then and .catch chained methods in combination with the await. We can also wrap the await call into a try-catch block. Let's take a look at our first example of doing error handling using the catch method in JavaScript. In this HTML page, we've still got our fetch function down here on lines 39 through 54. Depending on the value you pass in, if it's a truthy, we'll do a resolve, otherwise we'll do a reject. Up on lines 30 through 37 is our asynchronous function called error sample. And it's in here that we're going to do an await fetch. We're going to pass in false, so that means it's now going to reject. So it's going to go to the catch method that we see right there. Okay, it could also process the then part as well. Now, since we've awaited on that line, it has to wait to process either the .then or the .catch before anything else happens after that line. So after either the then or the catch is processed, then line 36 will do the console.log. So what's really nice about the async and await is it makes your code read more like synchronous code, a little bit easier to follow, I think. So let's go ahead and run this so we can watch this happen here. So there we go. We're in the fetch function. We get it goes to the catch block, so we're putting out that error. And then you see the after call to fetch. So reads very much like synchronous code. In addition to using the .then and the .catch methods, you may also use the traditional try-catch blocks in JavaScript to handle your errors coming back from promises. Let's take a look. In this HTML page, we have the exact same fetch function that you see down here on lines 44 through 59. We're going to call error sample, which is an asynchronous function on line 30. And then within there, we're going to put a try and a catch block. We're then going to let response equal to await fetch, and we're going to pass in a false. So that means it is going to hit the error block. So this is it's the exact same sample as what we just looked at, but done with a try catch. So if we run this, we see the same results. I think you'll find that when you're processing multiple promise calls, you'll find that using the async and await keywords becomes much easier. So let's take a look at the process flow when using multiple await calls in JavaScript. In this HTML page, if we take a look at our fetch function, we're passing in two parameters, a value and seconds. So we did this one in a previous lesson where we're going to create a promise and we'll resolve that promise after a certain amount of seconds has elapsed. So I'm going to use a set timeout here. Then up here in our different timeouts function, which is an asynchronous function, I'm going to let response equal to await fetch action, 3. So it's passing an action as the value in 3 seconds. We're then going to see what happens because this statement is going to run afterwards where we do a console.log on that response that comes back. Then we're going to response equals await fetch adventure, 2, so that's 2 seconds. We'll then display that response, and then we will await fetch comedy, 1, and we'll put out that response. So the question is, what happens here? Does the comedy one happen first because it's only 1 second, and then adventure, and then action? Or are we going to wait 3 seconds, then 2 seconds, and then 1 second? Well, good question. Let's find out. So I'll bring this up, bring up our console window. There you see we're in the action function. It displayed that, and then after 2 seconds, it now does that one, and comedy then came after just 1 second. So like I said, what's really nice about this async and await is that your code now reads more like synchronous code. In this lesson, we learned the async and await keywords. We created promises and asynchronous functions. We handled errors when using async and await, and we saw how code flows when using the async and await keywords. Coming up next, handling multiple promises in JavaScript.